Welcome. You're watching The Big Question. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. What started as a nearly 2,000 crore accounting discrepancy in IndusInd Bank's derivatives trading portfolio in March of this year has now snowballed into what the bank has itself termed as a case of a suspected fraud. The bank in its Q4 earnings call said that 172 crores of irregularity came to light in its microfinance business, with a fake fee income exposed across FY25. The suspected case of fraud has led India's fifth largest private lender to register its first quarterly loss in at least 2 decades to a whopping 2,300 crores. Just for perspective, what was penciled in as a loss for this quarter was about 300 crores. But the focus today is not about the IndusInd losses or its balance sheet. It's about the regulatory nature of this suspected fraud and perhaps the involvement of people working within the bank. It's about the system, the auditors, and the board of the bank. Do they hold no responsibility for a possible fraud that has taken place under their very noses? The other key question is about the top management who has recently quit, the CEO, the CFO. Is it enough to merely step down, or is it now time for central agencies to enter the investigation? This is how serious the matter is. Yesterday, the board pointed to an internal collusion between senior officials, former managerial personnel who overrode key internal controls, which may have led to the fraud. Not just that, the fraud has been concealed from the board and statutory auditors who claim they were kept in the dark. So the big question is, how did the IndusInd fraud go unnoticed for so long? Before we move to our conversation with top experts who understand the space inside out, let me go across to my colleague Vishwanath Nair, who's been tracking this story right from March. And Vishy, I think we can take credit today that we broke every bit of this story, and we didn't buy what the management and the promoters were saying at face value. We questioned it. Give us the timeline of how all of this has unfolded since March.
We didn't buy it, and I continue to not buy it. But let me take you through what the timeline of events is like. Now, all of this, of course, started on the 10th of March 2025. That is when the bank's top management, the CEO and the deputy CEO, both came on a conference call with analysts and said that they found discrepancies in the derivatives trading portfolio and that the financial hit because of these discrepancies was close to 2,000 crore. The bank also said during the call that they have appointed an external agency which will verify whatever they found through an internal check. Now, cut back to March 15th of 2025, if you can imagine, in these 5 days, obviously a lot of panic spread across the market, and depositors started pulling funds out of the bank. So the RBI had to come out with a statement saying that the depositors are safe. They don't need to be concerned so much about the issues that are happening at IndusInd Bank. The issues are currently being dealt with. Depositors can stay put. Then on the 20th of March, the board of IndusInd Bank said that they are constituting a fresh investigation. Remember that the management had already appointed an external agency to verify internal findings. This was a next step, appointing a fresh agency to look at the entire issue, find out the root cause, and also assign accountability in this entire matter. That was an important move by the board. Of course, it came significantly later than what was expected. Then a month later, on the 22nd of April, the bank discloses that we have found additional issues in the microfinance division, in the accounting. Specifically, their internal audit team was looking into these matters. EY was an agency that was helping this internal audit team. 5 days after that, the bank has had to come out with a notice saying that the external investigation that was constituted by the board is now complete, and that the financial impact of the derivatives issue was about 1,960 crore. Then the following day, essentially on the 28th of April, what happens is that the deputy CEO, Arun Khurana, announces his immediate resignation. He says that a lot of things happened under me. I was leading the Treasury Department, so I need to step down. A day after that, on the 29th of April, you had Sumant Katpale, the MD and CEO of the bank, step down, saying that under my watch, a lot of omissions and commissions have happened. I will take moral responsibility and step down. Till this point in time, everything goes swell. But then, on the 30th, again, so apologies for that, 30th on April, the bank says that a committee of executives is going to run the bank. That is an important sort of development. But yeah, on then May 9th, the bank comes out with a fresh disclosure It is saying that we are investigating insider trading allegations against former management personnel. This was Sumant Katpalia and Arun Khurana, who had now quit. Then again, on the 15th of May, more disclosures come out saying that, remember the microfinance issue that we found out? Well, there's a 674 crore accounting gap that we found, incorrect interest income being booked at the bank, and that is a problem. Then again, in the other assets and other liabilities department of the bank found unsubstantiated balances of about 595 crore, which was also a problem. Both of these issues had been adjusted as of January. That's what the bank said. But of course, these are still issues that were continuing. All of this then brings us to last evening, which is when the bank came out and said, considering all these investigations, considering the reviews that have happened, we believe that there is reason to suspect a fraud has been committed against the bank, and that the people involved include senior officials at IndusInd Bank, as well as the former managerial personnel, which is Sumant Karpalia and Arun Khurana.
Okay, so you've laid it out beautifully, and which is the fraud bit we don't know yet. We know that something doesn't smell right here. The question is it enough to say that we're cleaning up our books, now we'll get a new guy in place and everything will be well? Nothing more to see here, please move on. That's really what we're asking. Dinesh Kumar Khara joining in. He's former State Bank of India chairman. Dipali Pant, former executive director at RBI. Hetal Dalal, president and COO at IIAS. It's an investor watchdog, and of course Abizar Divanji, founder at Neostrat Advisors LLP. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for your time with us here on The Big Question. Mr. Khara, I'm going to come to you first. What do you make of this affair at IndusInd Bank?
Well, it is something which is a matter of concern, but of course it is a very clear reflection that the MD and CEO, who was a very integral part of the board, was expected to have enough controls in place, and such kind of things. First and foremost, these are the procedural issues. These procedural issues should have been tightened by the management itself, and of course that is the role and responsibility of the CFO. And of course the oversight is of the internal auditors and the external auditors. But what I gather that the auditors have said that they have not been shared the required information, but I think they could have probably gone beyond. And in fact, that is invariably the situation. Invariably, the auditors have a test check when it comes to they're certifying the correctness of the books. So this is something which is expected of them. So now the board, having said that, they are in the process of identifying the gaps and will be strengthening the processes appropriately. This is something which is stated by the board. So I think, of course, the other piece is that this was reported, derivative issues were reported by the management themselves, and something which is a very clear reflection that they understand that what the implications could be, and they have reported. But nevertheless, the damage is something which you have seen, particularly for a bank of this size. The kind of course, they have got a fairly strong balance sheet, but nevertheless, they have got the losses which they have absorbed in this quarter. That itself is a reflection that there is a need for tightening the processes within the bank, and also to have a culture for compliance, which is very essential. Respect for compliance and a culture for compliance, which is essentially nothing but the tone from the top, which is something which is always, it actually defines the culture of the organization also. So to my mind, that is something which should be required.
You know, what comes to mind is that this is a sector which is so tightly regulated. I mean, it's a large private bank which has crores and crores of depositor money. Dipali Pant, I'm going to come to you on this question, ma'am. This is a sector that's so tightly regulated that it's mind-boggling to understand how this all went on. Because remember, the first we heard about it is some discrepancy in derivatives trading. And now it turns out there's much more, and we don't really know if this is the end of it.
Yeah, Tavanna, this is something really very grave, I should say. And you see, the Reserve Bank, the statement by the RBI governor stemmed a confidence run on the bank that everybody is aware of. And the RBI inspection report had also pointed out that there were considerable weaknesses in the internal systems of the bank, but the bank went on its merry way and those were not addressed. This also points to the fact that now it's very essential for us to adopt Ind AS for banks, because Ind AS has specific accounting norms which ensure that this kind of thing cannot happen, because a derivative transaction is either an asset or a liability in the balance sheet. Or if you're adopting hedge accounting, then you have to take it as on the date when you hedged it. And you cannot do hedge accounting as the IndusInd Bank was doing internally. You have to have an external agency for it. It is also very shocking that in the entire Treasury division, there was no concurrent, no external validation of the trades that were taking place. So there is a complete failure of governance, and I'm sorry to say, of the board as well. And I'm always reminded, Tamanna, of a Latin proverb I'm very fond of, which is qui custodiat ipso custodes. Now, who's going to guard the guards? If it is a leadership failure and a governance failure, to say that it's just an accounting failure is taking it just too lightly. That there was a disclosure of divergence in asset classification and provisioning as the bank would like us to have it is simply not enough. As of now, there is a very uneasy calm that prevails, but a reassessment of IndusInd's economic prospects show me very clearly the outlook for the bank is very negative in FY26 and 27. And just because they have enough capital adequacy or NPA provisioning doesn't answer the question of the governance failure.
No, so one is governance failure. So there's ineptitude and there's malintent. I think we need to start distinguishing what we're seeing here exactly. Abhizar Divanji, just on the question of the board and the auditors and their responsibility. Today the auditors say, I didn't have enough information. It's pretty much whatever's left of that same board who's going to find a new MD, isn't it? Does that sit right with you?
No, so when you talk about the relevant responsibilities, Tamanna, first of all, it is the management's responsibility, and I will link this responsibility to the trickling of disclosures that happened over time. So we had the management which was clearly responsible. It should have known all these issues any which way, even if it was a malified intent or a oversight or whatever else. So at the end of the day, I think the management was clearly responsible and should have known these issues. If the management says that it did not know of those issues, then that is, I think, a graver problem. So, and that is linked to, we had the CEO come on TV and say, oh, we have this issue and we are going to resolve it. And nothing beyond it, and saying that, oh, RBI may not have liked me, so my term has not been extended. The disclosures were limited to that.
Abhizar, I almost forgot about RBI did not like me, so that's why my term was not extended. It sounds very rich now in hindsight.
Right. And then, so the first line of defense is the company. The second line of defense is the independent internal processes which then report into the board. So that is the second level of failure, where we did not have the internal audit function identify this on a concurrent basis and report into the board. And this is what clearly the chairman of the board said yesterday, that, we were not, some of these issues were not brought to our notice and there was an internal audit failure. And he has hinted at some kind of a collusion within the bank and there will be an investigation. But having said that, I think at the board level, there is enough and more supervision. And I've said this in the past that, thank God that RBI appoints the CEO. Because if such an incident in a non-regulated entity would have gone unnoticed and the CEO would not have been sacked. So what has happened here at least is that the CEO has been forced to resign because of external forces coming in. Ideally, the internal forces should have worked. And the third level of defense is then the auditor, in my opinion. So I think we have to get that very clear. We tend to move to the auditor at the first instance, but there is lines of defense that come about. And then the other thing is that not everything is a colluded fraud. For example, if you talk interest income, these are system generated entries.
Yeah.
Correct? So obviously there could be a systemic flaw. That is also an important thing. The derivatives issue.
Abhizar, the word fraud has come from the board.
No, I understand that. That's what I'm saying. That when the word fraud has come from the board, I think one needs to be cautious as to how that fraud is kind of linked to a series of events where people have consciously done things. That is a fraud. Now, actually establish that and say that you've done this, I think is a in a way, some part of the bank, including the auditor, may be shirking responsibility somewhere and pushing the blame on a few. Again, the idea is that it may or may not be a few. It could be a systemic issue. It could have been lines of defense being broken, and those lines of defense being broken actually is a very significant impact, and that is what actually forms opinion and perceptions about the bank. Like one, and I know you will head to the investor side soon, but one big investor had told me once that while majority has control, minority governs perception, and that's what's happening here.
I think perception, I don't know about perception. I mean, stock was up today, so that's a whole different story of what happens in the markets. But Hetal, perfect segue from Abizar to you at this point. Affixing responsibility and discerning the difference between culture of non-compliance, etc., and malified intent. One part could be that everyone on this board or a lot of people on this board were just bad at their jobs. And the other could be that there's something fishy cooking here. Because for a management to come and say on a call that there is a suspected fraud when they don't really want to reveal that much raises massive red flags.
Yes, actually, if you hear the call, the chairman of the board also said that there were senior leadership which sort of allowed the breach of internal processes and systems. And therefore, to that extent, I think there is clearly some questions to be asked in terms of what roles were played by employees. Now, leave aside IndusInd Bank, you just look at fraud very dispassionately, right? It really cannot happen without the connivance of certain set of employees. Depending upon the size of the fraud, you would argue, what levels those employees are. But in most instances, you will find some employees sort of tending to be involved. So if the board is saying that there is an issue of fraud, you're likely, and the board has actually said that some employees and ex-employees are sort of involved in this entire piece, then this is certainly something that needs to be investigated. More so, if you call it a fraud, there's clearly going to be more oversight and more layers of investigation which are going to come in. I think the question really is what is and I'm with Abizar in terms of saying that there is a first line of defense, second line of defense, and third line of defense. A lot of this is internal, right? There's a failure of the internal audit system itself. And the question, therefore, as Mr. Khara rightly said, is how are you strengthening the internal controls and systems and building a culture of compliance? So one of the big things we keep saying, right, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, culture eats most things for breakfast. And therefore, it is the board's job to also examine what is the kind of corporate culture within a particular entity or in the company that they are on, and see how some of these things can be addressed.
No, so let me come back to you, Mr. Khara, on this point of what next. The regulator, I mean, some saying today maybe the regulator needs to come in with a broom at this point. Yes, by the end of June, the board will come with its names and some names doing the round. But the idea that one person will come in and then clean up the whole system and that will be a fix, do you think that that's going to be enough? What is the path that you would like to see ahead? Because at the end of the day, it's not only about IndusInd Bank, it's about faith in the Indian banking system, which gets shaken when things like this happen. That's the bigger issue.
No, I fully agree with you. And that's why, I made this statement that the tone from the top will be something which will be defining the culture in the organization. And from that perspective, the new CEO will have a huge responsibility on his or her shoulder. Because one, of course, they will have to identify the gaps which are there in the processes. We'll have to fix those gaps, and also at the same time, they will have to bring in some kind of a responsibility in terms of this non-compliance. That is the other piece. And going forward, how should they avoid such kind of occurrences? Which also means that strengthening the internal audit processes significantly, reporting structure to the audit committee also getting into some kind of a test check. And similarly, when the external auditors come, they will also look at the test check. The very important part, which is essentially relating to the MFI and also the interest income being booked for some of the and non-compliance with the IRAC norms, that is nothing but it should be, it actually warrants a review into the accounting system. How come such assets be identified as performing, whereas in terms of definition, it should have been non-performing? And similarly, booking something as a fee income, it is nothing but a very clear defiance of the internal processes and the guidelines. So I think it actually requires a complete and thorough revamp into the systems and processes, and also identifying such systems and processes which has led to such kind of lapses. So I think this is quite a comprehensive job which is required to be carried out by the incoming CEO and the management of the bank.
I mean, don't envy the person who comes in, quite a bit of a cleanup. Abizar, do you see going forward liability on management who has stepped down? Because simply quitting and then saying, oh, I take moral responsibility may not be enough in this case. We don't know where it'll go, but the moment the word fraud has come in, do you think an investigation is warranted?
If the fraud happens, then I think it's going to be the responsibility of the audit committee and of the board to actually investigate that fraud, and the people who are responsible for that fraud be brought to light. And if it is the ex-employees, then clearly the ex-employees will be held accountable for that part of the work, for sure.
In criminal investigations, Abizar, criminal investigations. It's time for central agencies to come in and look at what's happening over here.
Sorry, but to be candid, criminal central agencies don't have an excellent track record of turning things around. But I would say that effective investigation is important, and so that a matter is brought to an end, so that IndusInd can start off with a cleaner slate. I think that is more important, and that should be the focus.
So, Hetal, do you agree with this? Saving IndusInd right now is more important than bringing those who have done this to book, or are both important from an investor perspective? Is it enough for the same auditors and the board that missed all of the red flags to conduct this investigation, decide who comes next?
See, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think, yes, the bank primarily needs to rebuild its confidence in investors. I think that's clearly shaken. And therefore, there is a great focus to figure out how much they need to clean up and get on. Now, the board has said at this stage that they're starting FY26 with a clean slate, and all the issues around accounting and fraud have been sort of booked into FY25. But I don't know whether that's really the end of the series. I think what we are going to see is new leadership come in. Most likely you're going to see an external, RBI is most likely going to get someone externally to come in, and you're hoping that you're going to see someone who's straight-jacketed, who'll tighten the systems, sort of follow the rules and responsibilities, and basically get the ship together. At this stage, I think that from an investor perspective, that is important. You have to understand that, all of this is not going to happen quickly. You're likely to see the bank just slowing down because it's going to be far more inward focused, at least in the immediate term, as new leadership steps in, just trying to get the ropes together. And therefore, from an investor perspective, trying to build that entire confidence back and getting back up and running is to my mind a priority. Yes, you do have to address the issues of the past. It's not that you can sort of walk away and say we've got a fresh start. And therefore, the external investigations, given that these will be independent and you still have RBI oversight on this entire issue, should bring to light, what are the sort of how many people are involved and what the elements of causation are, and therefore appropriate action should be taken.
Dipali Pant, if I may get your perspective on this, what needs to be done to bring back confidence in this whole issue and understand what really has happened, the culpability of those on the top who were running the bank while all of this was happening?
Well, Tamanna, I have a rather straight-jacketed regulatory view in this. Ideally, of course, you need a new man. You have to ensure that your systems and processes are in place. But I would also like to look at the culpability of those who created the whole mess in the first place. And I'm upset that they would be allowed to go scot-free. Simply saying that now I've told you there's this fraud, there's this gap, I don't know anything about it, does not work. As far as the auditors, the whole definition of audit, A is for, analyzing, understanding, deducing, and then having some kind of an intuitive understanding of the patterns which you're seeing and then tracking the transactions. And if a good auditor cannot do that, then the auditor is not required, because that is the objective and that is why external auditor is hired. After a bit, I think RBI should also be looking at all other banks so that there is no replication of this. Because you see, Tamanna, every system is only as strongest as its weakest link. And if banking runs on trust, now if people lose trust in foreign banks, in private banks, in banking as such, then there are a lot of people willing to come in, and there is already a lot of disintermediation happening. So this is a death knell, really. And I would have suspended, really superseded the entire board, and also taken very strict
I
action.
just want to quickly get views on that point. Should the entire board be superseded? Just Mr. Khara, your view on that?
Well, I think unless and until we really know that what responsibility is, because board eventually gets guided by what the MD and CEO will say. But yes, of course, board had a responsibility beyond that also. They could have, because when it comes to the audit committee of the board particularly, they interact with the executives of the bank. And when they interact with the executives of the bank, then they should have been in a position to assess what is the level of the compliance and how correct are their accounting reporting. Well, I think for me it is a bit premature to say that the board should have been superseded. But nevertheless, if at all they are found wanting, then of course. But as of now, I would not be really getting into that stage.
Okay, Abizar, your view on that point?
I think we don't know enough.
Okay.
Depending on what the issue would be, horses for horses. Take Yes Bank, for example, they did change the whole board because that was the gravity of that situation. If the gravity of this situation is similar, that will happen. If not, I think appropriate action.
Yeah, but you know what, the astonishing part is this has gone from a derivatives accounting discrepancy to a problem in the MFI book, to micro lending, to NPA not being accounted for properly, to fee income. So it seems to be spreading. It's not just one thing deepening.
So I think one will have to get to the bottom of it, Tamanna, and then decide who are the people which need. There will be gaps.
Yeah.
And the gaps will be identified across the chain. Okay. And those changes will be changed. It could be the statutory auditor who may have to be changed. Who knows? But that would also happen.
I don't see how the same auditor can continue beyond a point. I mean, we'll wait and see. We're watching this story very closely. A band-aid right now on a gaping wound, saying, okay, here's the new guy, he'll fix everything, might not be enough at this point. But thank you to all of you for joining us on this conversation. I've run out of time. IndusInd Bank in focus. What's also in focus is the way our banking regulations run. What's also in focus is the top brass of IndusInd Bank. And can they really say, oops, this was a mistake? Well, that's all the time we have on the big question, but stay tuned. A lot more coming up on NDTV Profit.